What's up guys, Andre here, and today I want to build a to-do app in Vue.js. Now I understand that a to-do app isn't the most exciting app to build, but I want to do it anyways for a few reasons. It really gives insight on the basics of a framework because it's easy to understand and it's easy to see how CRUD actions work. I'll also have follow-up videos where I extend the functionality and eventually hook it up to a Laravel backend for persistence. This will give you insight on the beginning stages of building single-page applications. Now typically when I work with Vue, I'm within a Laravel app because Laravel ships with Vue, but for these videos I'm going to keep the front end and back end independent from one another. The main reason is because I want experience with working with Vue on its own, and also I have plans in the future to swap out the front end with other languages, with other frameworks, maybe React, maybe Angular, and I also want to do that for the back end where I swap out the back end for other back end languages. Now I'm going to be assuming that you have some knowledge of Vue, but even if you don't, it should be somewhat easy to follow along because Vue is very nice to work with and easy to understand. I'll leave some links below to some great resources if you want to learn Vue from scratch. Now here is the final app that we'll be building. Just again, basic to-do list. You can add, you can edit if you double click, and there's other features like checking all, clear completed, and there's also some animations that you can see when you add new ones. So we'll be taking a look at all of that and building this from scratch. So this is somewhat based off of the to-do app that you can find in the Vue documentation. We'll try not to look at their code and build out our own from scratch, although I did take the functionality from here. And this to-do app is part of a bigger project where the same app is built out in different libraries and frameworks. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. Alright, so let's get started. We're going to be using the Vue CLI. Let me just stop this. So I have the Vue CLI installed already, and I'm still using the older version. It's not older, but as of this recording, Vue is really pushing the new version, which is still in beta, but I'm using, I think it's version 2.9.3. It doesn't really matter. The new version just makes the experience of building out an application slightly better than the current version. Okay, so I'm going to do Vue init, and I'm going to use Webpack, and the project name is going to be to-do Vue. And let me just go through this. It's fine. Fine. That's fine. We're not going to take a look at the router. No, you don't have to limit my code. No unit tests for now. No end-to-end tests. I'll stick with npm. Alright, so it says right here, just cd into it and then run npm run dev. And then npm run dev. And now our app is running here. And this is the boilerplate that comes with our application here. Let me just open it up in VS Code, and let's get started. So here is the entry HTML, but there's nothing going on here. The entry point for the JavaScript is in main.js. Here's where Vue gets imported, and here's where a new Vue instance is made. And you can see that the root component is this app component, which is right here. And you can see that the template is an image, and then this stuff is coming from this hello world component, which is in here, and this is where the rest of that page is coming from. So we'll keep the logo, but we'll start building our to-do app from here. So let me just go back into here. Let me just do some quick CSS resets. I'm just going to make sure that box sizing is set to border box. And then I'm going to make my own container. Set the max width to 600, and then we'll center it. Okay, what else am I doing? Let me just get rid of this. Oops, sorry. Let me just put a colon here. And then I'm just going to make the logo a bit smaller. Margin. And we'll give it a smaller height. Alright, see how that looks? Oh, I forgot to set my container. So I can put it here. So the Vue CLI automatically refreshes your page after you make changes, so that's good. Okay, so that is good. Oh, sorry, I also want to set this to logo. Okay, there you go, cool. Okay, let's make a new component. We'll put it within components. Let's call it TodoList.view, and from within here we can import it. TodoList from TodoList. Can specify it here. TodoList, and then we can call it here. Actually, let me copy this. Put it in here. We don't need this. Let me just make to-do list goes here. Name is to-do list. We can just leave the data. And I'll make it global. I don't want to make it scoped, because later on we're going to be extracting to other components, but we don't need any of this. And let's add to-do list and see if that works. Awesome. I also want to use what do I want to use? Sass for styles, just so I can nest selectors, just easier for me. So to do that, we're going to have to install a few npm packages. So npm install, we need Sass loader and node Sass. Let's just do that. And now we can use Sass if we do this. If we just do lang equals scss, then this will be interpreted as Sass. Okay, now let's add our input. So somewhere in here we can put an input text. Let's give it a class of to do input, and let's give it a placeholder of what needs to be done, and see how that looks. Why don't you refresh? Okay, actually let me put this to the side, put this to the side, and we can work like this. Just want to make sure it refreshes. I'm just going to paste in some code to style the input. Don't want to make you watch me do that. So I can save some time. So there you go, it looks better. Okay, let's also put a V model on this input. Let's call it new to do. And let's start building out our data here. Okay, so let's put that new to do in here. New to do. Let's make it empty at first. And at first, I just want to put a list of to-dos and have a few in there initially. So let's go ahead and make a to-dos array. It's going to be an array of objects. And these objects are our to-do lists. To-do items, sorry. So it's a good idea to have an ID. Later on, this is going to come from our database, but for now, we'll hard code it in. Finish Vue screencast, and then we need a Boolean value to see if it's completed or not. False, and that's good for now. Let's make another one. So to take over world, and that's not done yet. Okay, cool. So let's see if we can get these to-dos rendering in the browser. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to do a div, and we're going to do a v_for, which is a for loop in Vue, and we're going to do to-do in to-dos. So we're just going to loop over that to-dos array we just made, and then we have to make sure that we give it a key. So the key is todo.id. That's why I made that ID in there. And we'll give it a class so we can style it. To-do item. And let's just output that in another div. Actually, we'll just do it like this. To-do.title. And that should, there you go, output it here. Okay, now let's focus on adding to-dos. So what we want to have happen is the user types something in here, presses enter, and then it adds to this array and shows up here. So for event listeners, we can do this. At key up dot enter. I really like that feature, so you don't have to look up the key codes. And when we do that, we just want to call an add to do method, which we'll add right now. So right here after data, we can specify a new property called methods, and we can add that add to do method. Let me just move this up. Add to do, and let's just make sure that works. Okay, let's test it out. Hi, and it alerts it. Cool. So we want to add to this to-dos array right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can do this dot to-dos. So anytime you're referencing a data property, make sure you have this specified. So this dot to-dos dot push, and we want to push in an object. So the ID is going to be this dot ID for to do. We don't have that, so let's add that here. And I just want this to be a reference to the next ID we're going to use. Again, later on when we use a database, that's where it's going to come from. But for now, we don't have that, so let's just add that. What I name it? ID for to do, and this is hard code 3 in there. And then we'll increment it after we add to this array. The title is this.newToDo, which is the model on the input, so we can grab that automatically since Vue has two-way data binding. Completed by default is false, and editing, oh sorry, it's not that, okay. And then after we do that, we can just set the input to nothing, and we also want to increment that ID for todo plus plus. Okay, so let's see if that works. Adding, and it works, cool. Let's also make sure that we can't add empty ones. Right now I'm pressing enter, and it allows for adding empty strings. We don't want that. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not showing. Let me just double check. Let me check Vue DevTools, which you should definitely use. And there's 9 items in here, and there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so some of these are blank, and we don't want that. I think there's one blank one in here. See, that's blank. We don't want that to happen, so before we push, we can just do a check. So if this dot to do, sorry, new to do dot trim is 0, then just do an early return. Cool. Now we shouldn't be able to add. Now there should only be 4 here. Cool. Awesome. Sorry, that should be length, dot length. Okay. Now I want to work on removing items. So a little bit of UI changes here. I want a close button to the right of it. So I'm going to use Flexbox to justify content space between. So let me just paste in, again, some code, some styles, so you don't have to watch me. So the to-do item, which is this, is going to be display flex. And then I'm going to have 2 items in there. So I'm going to have this title goes in there. And then I'm going to have another one. Let's call it remove item. And that's just going to have times. There you go. Let me just style this real quickly as well, just so it has a cursor pointer. I copied the wrong thing. There you go. Just so it has a cursor pointer and some hover color change. Cool. Let me just make the font size of everything a bit bigger. So back to our root component. I think here, font size 24 pixels. There we go. Okay, so removing, where is it? Right here. So when we click it, we want to call a function called RemoveToDo, and we have to remove that to-do instance in the array, so we're going to need the index as well. And here we have to specify that we want an index too. So if we just put to-do index, then we get the index of the current item in the array. So let's add this method right here. Remove to-do index. And all we want to do is this dot to-dos. We're going to use the splice method. And we're going to give it the index. And we're going to remove one item. And we're not replacing it with anything. And that should delete it. So yeah, let's see if this works. Adding some. Okay, now let's delete these. Cool, and they delete. Let's check if they remove from here. You should see this one delete. And it does, cool. So now let's work on editing to-do items. And this can be a bit tricky. So let's take a look at how they do it. So the way they do it is, if you just inspect this, so yeah, you have to double click the element. So if you look at the to-do item, there's a div that displays the to-do item, but there's also an input that's hidden by default. If I take this off, you'll see that there's two of them, and it's just toggled between whether or not the state is in an editing state. So once I'm in editing state, then the div that displays it is not displayed. So let's do something similar. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit tricky, but we'll get through it. Okay, so what am I doing? Let's initially just make another input that is the same as this, but is a text box. Let's start with that. So I'm going to make another div, just so we have differentiation. Sorry, can't talk. Okay, so let's put another one. Text. And we're going to set the v model on this to be the todo.title. So it's the same as above. See if that works. Okay, so now we have a text box, which is the same as this. So that's a start. So I'm just going to do a few styles here. I'm going to name this one to-do, class to-do item left, because they have to look exactly the same. So when you double click it, it looks like it's the same item. So let's do that. So for this, let's give it a class of to-do item label, because it's the label. And then for this input, let's give this one a class of to-do item edit. And I'm just going to copy styles from my other window here. I'm going to paste it in down here. Paste. And let's see how that looks. Okay. And we're also going to need some state to check if we're actually in an editing state. Like when we first double click it, we want this to be in an editing state, and when we click off of it, we want that state to be removed. So what I did is I added that state within our array here. So it's just called editing for each item, and initially it's false. So I'm going to do that for these. And now let's see if we can toggle between the two states and hide and show these two components. So let's add a vif here, and we only want this to show if we're not editing. So to-do.editing, so not to-do.editing, which is going to be true initially because we want this to show. And then here we can do v-else like this, but we also want to have an event listener to change this to editing once we double click it. So let's call a EditToDo method, and we're going to pass in the to-do like this. What happened there? Double click equals, okay, edit to do. So let's go ahead and make that edit to do method right here. Edit to do. Make sure we have a comma, and let's flip that bit that's coming in. So to do that editing is true now. And let's see if this works. So there you go, you saw it disappear. Let's see if the other one appears when we double click this. And it doesn't. See if we name this right. Edit to do. Is this working? Let's just see if this works. I'm just going to alert something in here. Where to go? Alert, double clicked. Okay, so that's not working. What did I do wrong? Oh, sorry. This is a lowercase c. So refresh. Okay, so that worked. You see that the input is showing after we double click. Cool. Let me just remove that alert. But you can see that it still remains in the state even though after we click off of it. So we have to flip that bit once we listen for the blur event. And blur just means after this loses focus. So we want that to happen on two occasions. Once when we press enter, like we edit it and then we press enter. We want that to blur off, and also if we click off of it. So let's go ahead and do that. So right here we're going to listen for the blur event, and then we'll call a method called doneEdit, and we'll pass in the to do, and the same for the key up, enter. So let's go ahead and make that method. So doneEdit to do, so it's just the same. Should have copied it. And let's flip the bit the other way. And see if that works. So double click, enter some data, press enter. Okay, that's cool. And let's see if it works if we click off of it. And it does, cool. Okay, so there's still, okay, so there's sort of a focus issue here. Let's just do this again. So right now, after we double click, this text box is not focused. So we gotta click it again. So now it's focused. So now the blur event will work. So we gotta make sure that once we double click a certain item, we want that to focus. See, it's not focused right now. Now it's focused. Same with this. So the side effect of that is once we try to blur, it's not going to work. So we can have this case over here, which we don't want. So if you look in the Vue documentation for custom directives, they actually have an example of one for focusing once a component becomes visible. So this is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to put it anywhere here. I'll put it after the data. And now we can use, this doesn't look indented, right? Let's re-indent that. Okay, maybe this is not re-indented. Okay, I'll fix that later. Now we can just use that custom directive. So it's just v-focus. So on our input, which is right here, we can just do v-focus. And now, once we double click this, it should have focus and we should see our cursor. And we do, cool. Now the blur should work. And it does, cool. So another feature I want, which comes from the example here, is I want the ability to cancel out. Say you don't want to do that, you press escape, and that should bring back the original to-do item. So let's go ahead and do that. So right here, let's add another event listener for the escape key. So key up escape. Let's do cancel edit. Cancel edit. Let's add that down here. Let's put it here actually. Cancel edit to do, and let's set the to-do.editing to false. But let's also set the title to a property we'll add in a second called before edit cache, and this is just gonna grab the title before we edit it. So right here, when we first get into this editing state right here, we can set that. So this dot before edit cache equals to do dot title. And let's just set this in our data. We'll just set it to empty at first. Let's put it up here. Okay, and that should work. So if we double click it, we change it, but we press escape, that should bring it back. Cool. Also, we can use this to prevent adding empty strings. Right now, if we do this, we have an empty string and we don't want that. So in our done edit, we can just do a check like we did before, like right here. Let's grab this and paste it in. So it's if to do dot title dot trim dot length, then we can set the title to the cache. And now we shouldn't be able to add empty strings. Cool. Sorry, this should check for an empty string. Like that. So it should still work. Cool. Okay, now let's work on the checkbox that completes this to-do item. So up here, we can just add a new checkbox. So input checkbox, and we don't need any of this. And we just have to set the V model on it to be the to-do.completed. And that should do it. So that actually sets it, but there's no line through yet because we have to add some CSS for that. Let's just double check that it's set it. And right here, okay, so it sets it. You can see it set it to true and false. So let me add some CSS so we can have this line through item here. I'll show you how to add that to this over here. Let me just add this. Where is this? Okay. So I'm just adding that line through on this completed class, and I gave it a color. And we want to set it on this item over here. So the to-do item label. So how are we going to do that? So one of my favorite features is this one actually. It's the ability to add classes conditionally. It's a small feature, but I like the way Vue does it. So we're going to add a class and bind it. We already have a class before, but Vue is smart enough to just add it onto this class. So we can just do this. So we're going to have an object, and we're going to add this completed class if the to-do is completed. So yeah, it's a really nice clean syntax instead of doing like a ternary to check. So there you go. Once we click it, it adds that line through it. Okay, a few more features. If we look at here, we have the ability to check how many items are left. We also have the ability to check all. We'll do that later. We have the ability to filter these items. So for example, this is everything right now. We can filter it to only active ones, only completed ones, and we also have this clear completed, which will clear everything that you've checked. So let's start with the easiest first, and that's this. It just shows the number of items remaining. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to add some markup for that. So right here, I have an extra container, and I'm going to erase this for now because we're going to do that later. And this is the check all. Yep, this is going to be for checking all, and this is how many items we have left. Let me just, again, I'm going to paste in some CSS so that appears left and right. So right here, I'm just going to paste this in. So this extra container, okay, and there's extra stuff in here like that rule, and I'm going to add some buttons in here, so there's some styles for buttons, so I don't have to keep pasting in CSS. So for this remaining here, or items left, as you can see, there is a property here that says remaining, but that's not going to be a data property per se. It's going to be a computed property. So let's add a computed section here. And one of the questions that people always ask when they first start out in Vue is, what's the difference between computed properties and methods? Technically, you can put all your computed properties as methods, but a computed property is for composing new data derived from other data. And a few rules that they follow: they should not mutate any of your data, they should not accept parameters, and they should always return something. So for this remaining thing, this remaining property, so what are we trying to do here? We are, like I said, we have to return something. We just want to grab our to-dos, filter them down to ones that are not completed, and then count them. So we can do that. So we're going to get our to-dos, we're going to use the filter function, and we're going to just do filter them by ones that are not completed, and then we're going to just grab their length. And up here, remaining, yeah, so computer properties, you just refer to them like their data properties. So even though they're defined as a method, you just refer to them like their remaining properties, and that should work. And this should be reactive once we check one of these, and there it is. Cool. Okay, now let's work on this check all checkbox. So I have a checkbox for it already, And we want this to be reactive as well. And by that I mean if we click everything, like when I click this, we want this to be checked automatically. And when I uncheck this, I want this to uncheck automatically as well. So how are we going to do that? Let's make use of computer properties again. So we want to bind the checked to another computer property. Let's call it not any remaining, because we want the checkbox to be checked when nothing is remaining. So let's make another computer property called any remaining. Where is it? Right here. Any remaining. Again, it doesn't take any parameters and it has to return something. And all we're going to do is just make use of this other computer property that we just made and just check if it's not 0. So this dot remaining is not 0. And that should work. So if we go over here, and that shouldn't be checked, but once I check this, this should check automatically. And it does. Cool. If I uncheck it, it should uncheck. And it does. Cool. And now we just have to work on once we click this manually ourselves. So let's go ahead and do that. And all we have to do is listen for an event. So the event is change, and that's just when you click on it. And it's called a method, check all to-dos. So let's go ahead and make that check all to-dos method. Do it down here. Check all to-dos. And all we're going to do is go through the to-dos array for each to-do. We just want to set it based on if we check the box or not. So to-do.completed equals, let's do event.target.checked. So that's just if we manually checked it. So that should work. Let's check it out. No pun intended. So this still works, cool, but this works as well if you just check it manually. Awesome. See if we check it. Yep, looks like it works. Now let's work on those filters. So the all active and completed filters. Just going to paste some more code in here. So I have another section that has those filters. And don't mind this, we'll add that in a second. This is where the complete all button goes. Or what was it? It's called, I have to check one, clear completed. Let's just put a placeholder. And okay, so I pasted that in. Okay, I'll just leave it and explain it. So what's going on here? We have 3 buttons. Let me save this. Okay, so we have 3 buttons, and we have this conditional class again, and the condition is based on this filter data property, which we don't have. Let's add that. And by default, that's going to be all. And based on what the user selects here, this is going to change. You see how that's active now? Because if the filter is all, then it's active. And then every time we click another button, we're just going to change that filter. And I also have an active class that sets the color. But now, how do we set the filters to change the actual list of to-dos? So if you look up here, we are iterating over our to-dos array, but now we want to iterate over whatever the user selects here. So we want to make a new one called to-dos filtered. So this is just going to be another computed property, and this is just going to be based on what they select down here. So let me show you what I mean. So in our computed properties here, let's just add another one called to-dos filtered, and we just have to check. So if this dot filter is all, then we're going to return just what we had before, so just the normal to-dos. And we're going to have two more cases. This dot filter equals active, and let's just grab one more. And the last one is, what's the last one? Completed. And it's just, I don't think you have this, but this is for the default case. Okay, so what are we doing for these two? So what's active? Active is just the to-dos that are not yet completed. So we can just do this dot to-dos dot filter to do not to do dot completed. And for the other one, it's just the other way around. So completed is just that. And if you save that, let's add a few more. And let's check a few. Now if I click active, it should only show these three. And it does. Completed should only show the two that I checked. Cool. So that's working. Okay, now let's work on this clear completed button. So we already have a placeholder. Let's make it a button. So button clear completed. And let's just conditionally show it. Let's make a new computed property again. So show clear completed button. And then once we click it, here, we want to run a method, clear completed method. Okay, so show clear completed button. Let's grab that. Let's make another one right here. And all we're doing here is making sure that we've checked at least one. So like we've been doing, just filter it down to what we've checked and check if it's greater than 0. So see, it won't show now, but if you check one, it should show. There you go, cool. Now let's work on the actual button. So I named it clear completed. Let's grab that. Down here, clear completed. So we're just going to grab our to-dos array, and we're just going to set it to all of the items that are not completed. Filter to do is not completed. That should do it. Deleted. Okay. So let's see if this works. Let me add a few. And let's just remove these two. And 2 should remain. Awesome, and it works. Now let's quickly go over animations. So the easiest way to show animations are on things that only show up conditionally, so like what we just did there. So for that show clear completed button, so when this button only appears sometimes, let's go ahead and what are we doing? We're going to wrap it in this transition tag. And we're going to close it. And let me just paste in some more CSS that actually does the transition. Just the basic transitions. So we have to specify the enter active and the leave active. This is based on what we named it. And that should fade. See if it fades. There you go. See it fade in and out. And also, we can also incorporate an animation library like animate CSS, which is the most popular one. This one here. I'm sure you've seen this before. So we want to animate our to-dos, and this is within a for loop, so it's slightly different. So we want to wrap that into with a transition group tag, and the name actually doesn't matter here because we're going to be using the enter active class, and this is just the animate CSS class, and the leave active class is also the CSS class for animate CSS. And now all we have to do is import that in our CSS. So if I just import it here down in our CSS, everything should work up here, right here. I'm just going to import it using an import statement. I'm just grabbing it from a CDN. And now, once we add a new to-do, this animation should kick in. So it's the animated fade in up. Just refresh to make sure. Animation, and there's our animation. It's really slow right now. I'll show you how to change that in a sec. And if we remove it, there you go, it removes. So to make it faster, just go into your to-do item CSS. So whatever you're iterating over, just give it a class. And just do animation duration. 0.3 seconds is good for me, and now it should be faster. Animation. Cool, that's a good speed for me. So there you have it, guys. We've managed to build out this to-do app in Vue.js and managed to make it very dynamic, very robust, with not too many lines of code. In future videos, we'll take a look at extracting components and how they can communicate between each other. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.